Hello. Why are teams not producing like they were in the past few years? And what are we going to do about it? My name is Cantey. Thank you for dialing into our LinkedIn Live. And if you're catching the replay, I appreciate you being here. If you know anything about me, I'm trying new technology and trying new things. So I'm hoping that the connection is here. If we have anybody that is dialing in, I would love to be able to hear in the chat where you're coming from. It always helps me to see what we've got going on and who's listening and participating. So thanks for being here. Again, why are these teams that we have had working for us, with us for the past couple of years, why all of a sudden are things slowing down? And there may be some pretty obvious answers out there that maybe you're accepting. And I'm going to challenge the way you're thinking and say maybe you should not be accepting the reasons and excuses that you're hearing today. I think there's some things that we could be doing proactively to be able to correct some of these objections that we're hearing. In case you're new to me, my name is Catherine Cantey. I am an executive coach and a podcast host of Business Vitality. I appreciate you being here. The question is, why are we slowing down? And I think the answer is business is not slowing down. First time, probably 3 or 4 years, we have to start working again. So the whole supply demand thing that we learned about in college about economies of scale and supply and demand, there was such a huge demand of buyers out there that we pretty much just had to respond. And today it's changing. And sometimes we have to remember, is it our world that we're looking at or the world? And if you think about it, the media loves to talk about what they're seeing, and what they report on is the world. And sometimes I assume that the world is my world. And in reality, I mean, for the world, according to media, everything's slowing down. But when I look at what my world is showing in regards to real estate sales, for example, the world is showing that things are slowing down. And in my world, I have watched a 14-acre tract of dirt in a very small rural community get purchased, get developed, turned into 14 lots. All but 3 have been pre-sold before the infrastructure has even been put in. This has all taken place within a few weeks. So I can either choose to live in the world that the media likes to put out there, which they get paid for that. That's marketing, that's advertising, that's entertainment. Or I can choose to change my mindset and choose to live in my world where there is abundance, where there is gratitude, where there is good stuff that's going on. And so I think the first thing we have to think about is, do we choose to live in this world, the world, our own world? So after we look at this, I want to be able to think about, let's look at the business world. And some of us are running some pretty large businesses. If you're not running a pretty large business, you're probably running a large department. Your livelihood is dependent upon it. And what we want to do is look at what we are being told by our front line. What is our front line telling us? And are they telling us that things are just slowing down? And if they are telling us this, let's reflect on a few questions. If you know anything about me, you know that I love to be able to reflect on some different ideas. So if the front line is telling us that things are slowing down, let's reflect on these ideas. Who is sharing these comments with us? Who is this? Who are these people that are sharing the feedback that everything is slowing down? How long have they been with the company? How long have these folks that are sharing with us that things are slowing down, how long have they been with the company? Third thing, were they with us before COVID? So if you're hearing that things are slowing down, I want you to ask yourself 3 questions. You may want to write these questions down. The first one is, who is sharing these comments with us? Who is it? Second question, how long have those individuals who are sharing this feedback that the world is slowing down, how long have they been with the company? Third question you want to ask yourself were they with us? Were they with the company before COVID? So real quick, 3 questions. If you're hearing that business is slowing down, the world is slowing down, who's sharing these comments? How long have they been with your company? Were they with you before COVID? All right. So if you're new to this LinkedIn Live, my name is Catherine Cantey. I'm an executive coach. I'm a podcast host of Business Vitality. I partner with businesses, executives, leaders, and teams to create measurable leadership change. We do that using practical applications to be able to accelerate results for our clients. So the three questions that folks need to ask themselves if they're seeing a slowdown in the business: who's sharing this feedback with you? How long have they been with the company? And where were they before COVID? Were they with the company or were with somebody else? Did you hire them during COVID? These questions are important. We're going to talk about them in a minute. So pre-COVID, I want you to think about this. Pre-COVID, most of us had training programs in place. Most of us had sales programs in place. I know when I started with a lot of the businesses that I have worked with over the years, insurance companies, banks, wherever it is, I always had some sort of onboarding program or I had some sort of sales program. And I think it's true, even for operations, there's some kind of product training. There's some kind of training that's taking place. And if that was taking place before COVID, this was probably a very well-oiled machine. If you have a minute, if you're listening to this, if you want to put in the chat, I would love to hear from you. Did you have a sales program in place at your company before COVID? If you did, put a yes in there. If you didn't, then say, no, we didn't have a sales program before COVID. I'm going to think that probably the bulk of you, if you got a business that's been around for a while, you had a sales program before COVID. If during COVID you stopped training because the results you were getting were acceptable, ask yourself this question. During COVID, did you actually slow down, reduce, or just stop, pause your sales training during COVID because the results you were getting were acceptable? And if the results of these individuals, these sales professionals, and I'll almost pause here, sales professionals are everywhere in the company. You have sales at the front line, you have sales in operations, and some of you may resist that idea. But we're all in sales. We may be able to support the frontline customer, but we may also be collaborating with another department. We could be collaborating with somebody on our team. These communications and these collaborations, these are partnerships where we're both trying to strive to accomplish a goal. And we're both trying to work together to accomplish this stuff. And so for us to be able to do that, we have to sell each other these ideas. And so whether we're selling them to an outside client or whether we're selling them to an inside team, we're all in sales. We're all in communication. We're all about collaboration and driving the results forward. So during COVID, did the training stop? And I think it's just pretty easy to talk about sales because I think sales is going to get impacted first. And then we're going to see operations get impacted and slow down next. But we're going to see right now that we're all adjusting for this frontline sales impact. And this frontline sales impact, you're starting to ask yourself, did we slow down sales training because the results we were getting during COVID were acceptable? If that is the answer, you just said, we paused. It was working. It was awesome. We were hiring people. They were producing the results. We were, exceeding our expectations at the time. So if you paused training or sales training during COVID, the answer is very clear. The answer is to start training again. Start the old programs back. Maybe dust them off, refine them, take what you've learned over the past 2 or 3 years and be able to implement what you've got, the changes, and be able to get the sales training back, get the product training back for your operations people, get the basics back. That's what we're going for today. With my podcast, Business Vitality, we talk about the tried and true practical business applications. And everybody who's been through a number of cycles, we all know we've got to get back to the basics. And that's what we're doing. Today, we're going back to the basics. Get the sales program back if you paused it. And it's acceptable. You're probably booking more business than you even knew what to do with. And it's fantastic. You got to run when you can run. But right now, we might be slowing down. So if we're slowing down, we got to get back to the basics and we got to get the fundamentals going again. We have to get the sales training. We got to get the product training. We got to get all those basics back. Because when it comes down to it, we got to get back down to the fundamentals. Any job that I ever had great success with, we had great fundamentals. We would pause, we would get back to them, and we would take a step back before we could take a leap forward. So if you pause sales training during COVID, I highly recommend get a Post-it note, write it down, and be able to put a note on the desk. We got to put sales training back in place. We got to get product training back in place. It is time to bring it back to life. All right, so before I move to the second question, I just want to be able to share with you. My name is Catherine Cantey. I'm an executive coach, podcast host. I've worked with Marshall Goldsmith, and I'm one of his 12 master certified stakeholder center coaches in the U.S. I love the work that we're doing. I have always wanted to take lessons learned. That way I felt like what I was learning didn't go in vain. All the mistakes that I've made over the years and the decades didn't go to waste. And I'm using that to coach my clients that I have today. And so my clients have been able to achieve 100% measured change as seen by the people around them using a 4-decade proven process that Marshall taught me. And we're able to accelerate results and accelerate growth within these businesses that choose to follow these processes. So if you pause sales training during COVID, get it back in place. Pick up the phone, call L&D, Learning and Development, get it back in place. If you don't know where to start, give me a call. I know I can help you. We can brainstorm. We can co-create some solutions. We can figure this out. The next question is, during COVID, this one's going to be a little bit harder. During COVID, did you continue with your sales training program like nothing has changed? Were your sales team members successful during COVID? Are you wondering right now, we trained throughout COVID. We did not skip a beat. We kept training. Why are the sales declining right now? What is happening? This is a real question. There's a lot of companies out there who continued with sales training through COVID. And right now they're seeing a decline in sales. This is going to be kind of fun to talk about. You trained all throughout COVID. You got great momentum. You're bringing in some new people. You're doing the training. You're doing the feedback with your frontline sales folks, the sales managers. Everything's just clicking. It's working, and everybody's there. And all of a sudden, you're seeing a decline in sales. How can this even be possible? We trained before COVID. We've hired new people. We're training during COVID. We're booking sales. We're making stuff happen. And now sales are declining. Something has changed. And I want to ask you 2 vital questions. And I have learned over the years, over the decades, to ask these questions because sometimes we're not ready for it. The first question is, are you ready to address the issue of why sales are down? Are you ready to address the issue of why sales are down? You may not be ready. I have been in boardrooms where professionals, they weren't ready yet. And they may not have known that they weren't ready, but they were not ready to receive what the answer was. So the first question is, ask yourself, are you ready to address the issue of why sales are down? Second question, is the pain of same so bad that you're willing to do something about it? I first heard this quote from Brent Adamson at the CEB conference. I don't even know how many years ago it was. But he said, when the pain of same hurts more than the pain of change, that's when something happens. And right now, if you're like, the pain right now hurts more than what I'm going to have to do to change to get the results, then you're ready to go ahead and move forward and do something about it. It's pretty exciting. It hurts when we're there. Like we've all been there. We're like, man, I really hate this problem that we got. Doesn't hurt bad enough to do anything about it. But the day comes when we're just fed up and we don't want to deal with it anymore. And we're like, I can't take this anymore. I cannot continue to do what I'm doing and not get the results. I'm willing to make a change. And if you're finally there because the pain of same hurts more than the pain of change, then we're ready to keep talking about what's going on with sales. But first, you've got to be ready for it. And the pain has to hurt enough to be able to do something about it. So if you kept training during COVID, the market's probably not adjusting. We can accept it. Like if that's what we want to accept, we can accept it. But I'm not going to accept it because I don't think that's a reasonable answer, because I think that we can rise above this and we can get through it. Because the companies that continue to remain vital month after month, year after year, decade after decade, they respond to these changes and they continue to move forward and they continue to thrive. So if you're okay with not just saying, hey, the market's adjusting, this is just what it's going to be, I think it's time for us to take full responsibility and remember that your world is not the world. And when we think about it, your world is not the world. We live in our world. Let's see what we can do about this in our world. The chances are, for the past 3 years, your sales team did not have to follow a sales process to be successful. That might be shocking to some of y'all. Your sales team for the past 3 years probably did not have to follow a sales process to win new business. Think about it. I mean, it was gangbusters. We're hiring people. I mean, you cannot get enough of whatever it is somebody's selling. Things are starting to change a little bit. I had one CEO share with me, and this is kind of funny. It's only funny when it's not you. And I've talked about this before. Things are funny when you're not married to the joke. Things are funny when you're not in that relationship with the joke. So this may not be funny to some people if you're in it. But one CEO shared with me recently. He said, my team has been like a teenager using the GPS, going to the local grocery store. Thinking was not required. The teenager did not have to think because they used the GPS to go to the grocery store back and forth, back and forth, back and forth for 3 years. All this during COVID. So you got this teenager who's running GPS. These are like I'm going to venture out and say frontline sales. They've just been booking business, making phone calls, whatever it is, taking orders, turning them in, getting it done. Not a big deal. It's just on fire. But really, what this CEO shared with me is basically some of these sales folks, they are like teenagers using the GPS to drive to the grocery store. And if any of us have children, we could probably relate. We're like, good Lord, they still use GPS to go down to the Walmart to go get groceries. Blows my mind. They're not thinking. And I've got a lot of CEOs that come to me and they're like, I need people who can think. I can hire people all day long to enter spreadsheets, but I need somebody who can think. What's happening is thinking was not required for the past 3 years. We were just booking business. They truly do not know how to get to the store if the GPS doesn't work. They don't know how to close a deal if it's not following this same easy process of take the order and turn the form in. They don't know how to utilize what they know. They truly do not know how to utilize what they know. They don't know how to pull into their intuition and their gut. And quite frankly, some of them don't have intuition or a gut to be able to follow because we live on these devices. Because when we live on this and we default to our thinking on this, we're losing our intuition to be able to respond to client needs, objections, think on our feet, and solve problems in real time. All right, so if you're still here, the pain must be pretty real. It takes a lot of courage for me to continue to talk about this. It takes even more courage for you to listen to this. If you're just dialing in, my name is Catherine Cantey. I'm an executive coach and a podcast host of Business Vitality. And today we are talking about why teams are not producing today and what are we going to do about it. Quick recap. If you paused your sales program or your operations, your product training during COVID because things were busy and things were just acceptable, the first solution is turn that stuff back on. Call your L&D, call your training, call your learning and development, get the programs back into place and turn them on. Right now, that's the first low-hanging fruit. We all love some low-hanging fruit. Second thing, if you trained all during COVID and the business is still being booked, and now you're starting to see a shift down, a decline in sales, this is what we're talking about. Because a lot of us kept the sales training going during COVID, and we're like, why in the world are sales declining right now? We trained throughout this whole thing. It makes no sense. What I want to share with you is if team members started after June of 2020, they don't know what they don't know. They haven't seen this before in your business. I was just talking to one executive last week, and he said that the majority of his team started during COVID. These folks, they don't know what they haven't seen. So this is going to be a hurdle to be able, we've got to be able to overcome this. And for successful team members who've actually been with you prior to COVID, prior to that June 2019, they see the answers. They see the answers clearer than anyone else. They know what they've got to do. And if they were with you before COVID, they're the ones that are probably, we need to be able to retain these folks because they're going to get us through these next few years and beyond. They have seen some cycles. They're going to be able to get us through. We've made some hires. A lot of us made a lot of hires over COVID. We may have to make some adjustments. And we're seeing so many adjustments right now. Even in just the tech sector alone, you can look at how many adjustments are going on. So think about this. If your team member started after 2020 and they don't know what's going on, this is new to them. But if you've got your sales folks, operations folks, they were here prior to COVID, they know what's about to happen. They see the writing on the wall. They know that that was a cycle that we just went through, and now we're going to adjust. You know, one company shared with me post-COVID sales, went through COVID, coming through it, back out there, just selling along. Sales were an easy 35% success. 1/3 of the time, they just had to show up, shake a hand, take an order, and leave. That's pretty fun. Who doesn't want to have 35% success? Now, depending on what industry you're in, it's going to differ no matter what. Same type sales for this company, they're seeing a success rate of 20%. They're doing the exact same sales process, they think. They have gone from 35% closure to 20% closure. A 15% decline in new business is huge for any business, any department, any group. 15% decline, and you're just like scratching your head. What is going on, people? We've trained throughout COVID. We have, we were just hitting the ball out of the park. Post-COVID, this is fantastic, but what's happening? Why are we seeing this decline? And what we're finding when we dig into this is that over time, we've seen three things. And before I go on, I want to share with you, my name is Catherine Cantey. I'm an executive coach, a podcast host of Business Vitality. I would love for you to visit my website, catherinecantey.com, to learn more about some of the work that we're doing, client successes that we have out there. If any of this is hitting home and you want to co-create a solution, give me a call. We'll brainstorm together. A lot of my clients start off with, I'm not sure if you can help. I don't know if I can help either, but let's talk. Let's learn. So back to this story. What happened for a company to go from 35% closing of sales to 20% when the sales program is still clicking, just like it always has? So what happened were three things. The first thing is we created less accountability. We created less accountability. Second thing, we became lazy, kind of decreased our efforts a little bit. Got a little lazy. First thing, we created less accountability. Second thing, we just got a little comfortable. We got lazy. Third thing, we stopped reflecting on what was working and what we need to do differently going forward. So if your sales, you've got your training, is still going, you've seen your sales, they were just like knock it out of the park, fantastic. And now all of a sudden, you're starting to see a little decline. Another side note, I am amazed at the number of businesses that don't know their numbers, know that they've already gone from 35% to 20% close rate decline. They don't even know that that's going on. I have worked with too many businesses. They don't know what their pipeline is. It's sad. So you may not even know you have this problem yet. But for the folks who track their numbers and live by their numbers, if you've seen a 35% success rate drop to 20%, this is what they're seeing if they kept their sales training going on. What happened was we created less accountability. We became lazy. And we stopped reflecting upon what is working, what's not working, and what are we going to do differently going forward. So I hate to break it to you, but some of our COVID hires, They may not have been good in the first place. Nobody wants to hear that. But you remember that whole hiring problem that we had? And we were just hiring people. If they could fog a mirror, we hired them and they got training and we put them out into the field. Well, it's about to get real. We're about to see if they can really, close a deal and follow the sales process. And I think first, I talk a lot about gratitude. We need to be grateful that we had a great 3-year run. A lot of us had a great 3-year run. Our sales teams only had to show up, look good, look presentable, have a good handshake, and take orders. Because there was so much demand in the market. Our sales team, they only had to show up, look presentable, have a good handshake, take an order, and hand it off. Safe to say, the businesses that are going to be getting through this next phase of business, this next cycle, are getting back to work. They're solving problems. And they're no longer showing up, looking good, having a handshake, a good handshake, and taking orders. These sales professionals, business professionals, these executives who show up to get the business, to retain the business, they're overcoming objections like they haven't had to in a number of years. They're getting scrappy with what they're having to bring to the table. And they're solving problems to grow the business. Folks that are winning right now in business are overcoming objections, they're getting scrappy, and they're solving problems to grow the business. We are creating accountability because after so much of this reflection of like what's working, what's not working, what do we need to do going forward, accountability is what drives business. Accountability is what drives business success. Month after month, quarter after quarter, year after year. That's business vitality. It's accountability. And how do we get back to the basics, to the fundamentals of holding our team accountable for what they're doing? And these relationships that we have, I know I talk about sales training, but we got to get back to product training. We got to get back to the fundamentals. We got to get back to the basics. Because at the end of the day, it's the basics that keep us alive and continue to allow us to thrive. So how did we get here? This is kind of a fun question, How did we get here? Like, how did this happen? And it's pretty easy to accept the fact, man, sales are up to 35%. This is fantastic. Upper management gets happy with increased sales results. That allows the mid-managers to be happy too. This stuff trickles down. It creates no pressure. It creates no urgency, and it creates no real accountability for what's going on. The result is the sales team today, and even the folks within the business today, are caving in with generic objections. They're caving in. I'm going to venture to say this is not just frontline. Even inside the business, if there is a generic objection coming into a department, they're collaborating with another department, they're just caving in because they didn't have to get creative or scrappy for the past couple years. Our muscle memories, they just reform back to what we knew and what was working. For the past 3 years, we've had a great run. Let's be grateful for it. But let's know now, for us to continue to grow and to thrive, we're going to have to be able to overcome not just the basic objections of business, but we're going to have to overcome this stuff and we're going to have to take it further. We're going to have to get creative thinking skills back in there. Right now, the real sales teams are showing up. They're scrappy. They show urgency. They have mortgages that they have to pay. They have kids that are in college. And these are the same people who have done this before, and they're going to be able to do it again. And there's going to be folks that are going to rise to the occasion. They've never been through this before. I just dialed into a chief credit officer call, and they're like, these folks, they've been with the bank for 20 years. They've never seen double-digit interest rates. They don't know what they don't know. There's going to be folks in there that are going to be able to rise to the occasion. It is totally possible if we support them in the correct manner. If we get back to the basics of sales training, product training, all of that good fundamental information to be able to support them to win. The same stuff that we had to do many years ago in order to get these seasoned veterans to be able to handle these same objections that they're going to be coming through here much easier than some of these newer hires. These are, the true professionals that are stepping up to the plate. This is not the first time that they've had to solve problems. This is not the first time that they had to start selling. And it's probably not going to be their last. So how do we support existing sales professionals, existing operational professionals that have been through this before? How do we create solutions to be able to collaborate with maybe some of these less tenured professionals that we want to invest in? And are we okay with the fact that not everybody's going to make it? That's a hard decision. You're going to lose sleep because you're like, I really like them. They're fantastic. They're a good person. I don't want to do this. That we got to make hard decisions, and we've got to support the folks that are thriving and excelling, and we've got to invest in them because they're going to be here with us at the end. For folks that are just joining, my name is Catherine Cantey. I'm an executive coach, a podcast host of Business Vitality. We talk about a lot of practical applications of how businesses continue to grow and to thrive, decade after decade. I love the interviews that we're able to do. If you're able to jump out of Spotify and check it out, it's Business Vitality is the podcast. My website is catherinecantey.com. Today, we're talking about, why are teams not producing like they were a few years ago, and what are we going to do about it? And in a kind of a recap, if you paused sales training during COVID because things were fine, the easy low-hanging fruit is turn it back on. Get these folks back into sales training. Let's get them going. If you trained during COVID, you still did product training, you still did sales training during COVID, and the numbers are declining, it's because we got too comfortable and we don't have any accountability anymore like we used to. We have to create accountability. We have to hold these folks accountable. Just like everyone holds us accountable, it's going to trickle back down throughout the organization to the front line to create urgency. We've got to be able to support them. We've got to get them back to following the process. Follow the product process. Follow the sales process. Personally, when I got out of college, I went through countless sales programs. In one example, I learned how to sell 21% mortgages, 39% short-term loans, and I lent out 125% loan to value on homes. Not saying it was the most flattering time of my career, but I can tell you, I followed the sales process. I was held accountable. Every 2 weeks, I was reviewed for my sales results. Every month, I was reviewed again, and then once a quarter, I was reviewed again on my sales results. I was held accountable throughout the whole process. I had an opportunity to get a 3, 4, 5% raise every 90 days. I got a 5% raise every 90 days because I followed the process. Within 18 months, I was running 200% and 300% of my sales goals because I followed the process. And we broke it down into executable, accountable, actionable items every day. And these small steps every day created momentum that allowed us to win and create more business. I'm not going to lie to you. It wasn't like, super easy. It was work. And at times it was fun. And at times it was just work. Like we just had to show up and work, and that's okay. I get what you're going through. I've been on that front line. I've seen it. I've also sat for 10 years in boardrooms and listened to the strategy behind all this. And I understand what the operations are going through. They just got slammed with 3 years of booking new business. They're probably seeing cuts right now. They don't know how they're going to continue to get more out of the day. And sometimes we're going to have to get scrappy. And if we go back and we look at the frontline sales and you see the decline in your sales, if you are motivated and you have the correct accountability processes in place, we've got to be able to stop the excuses and remember that we live in our world, not the world. And what can we do to control our world? I can't solve the world's problem, but I can solve my own problems, or at least try to. And not until you absolutely have to sell. Like when you have to sell because you have to make your rent payment, you have to make your car payment, you have to make your insurance payment, That's when you get scrappy. That's when you get creative. That's when you can learn to overcome objections. But not until you're back in that environment do you remember what you got to do to make it happen. You know, when you get scrappy, you come up with some crazy replies, and your prospect or your client may rebuttal back at you and say, what about the competitor's quote? I feel like I'm going to shop around. I'm going to go talk to your competitor. And in the past, we might have been like, that's fine. But today, the answer needs to be a little scrappy. We got to get creative. We need to be able to say with confidence, would you buy a car with 3 tires? Because that's what you're doing if you're going to the competition. We have a full service solution and we can help you. And we're excited to be able to do it. And we are overcoming objections in order to keep the business going. It's fun. We get creative. We got to figure out new ways to attract this business because the demand is making us get creative again and think in new ways. And it's not the end of the world. We've been through this before. We just forgot because it was so comfortable. So when folks, they ask me and they're like, Catherine, what do you do all day in regards to executive coaching and consulting? And I want to share with you, in a nutshell, I partner with businesses, executives, leaders, and teams to create measurable leadership change. And we create this change using practical applications. 100% of my clients have been able to achieve the goals that they set forth. And I'm excited to be able to support them and continue to support them going forward. If you're wondering, can you help me, Catherine? I'm not even sure if you're the right person. I may not be the right person, but I know I could probably get you connected with somebody if I'm not. I would love for you to send me a message on LinkedIn, or you can visit my website at catherinecantey.com. You can schedule a call there. We can co-create a solution. We can brainstorm some ideas. But I'd be curious to hear from you. What are you doing today? And what are you going to be doing going forward to adjust to your world as you see it? Again, my name is Catherine Cantey. I am an executive coach and a podcast host of Business Vitality. I appreciate you being here, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.